The council chamber of Tessara Prime stretched impossibly high, its crystalline dome reflecting the swirling colors of distant nebulae. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy occupied the tiers, each species distinct, each voice uniquely tuned to its own biology. Today the chamber felt unusually tense. Every species present sensed that history was about to be written, and the subject of that history was humanity, a species already notorious across dozens of star systems for its chaotic inventiveness. At the center of the chamber stood Director Rael Solis, a scaled reptilian whose amber eyes reflected the weight of centuries of bureaucratic service. He had spent decades navigating the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy, yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the challenge humanity presented. Over 500 human governments, countless private corporations, rogue militias, and isolated inventors, each developing weapons independently, each guarding its secrets as fiercely as any dragon hoarding gold, made even the simplest task of cataloging their arsenal an almost impossible feat. Solis rose, his long tail flicking against the polished floor in a subtle display of impatience. Around him, delegates shuffled data pads and muttered in dozens of languages. The Zyphrons, a six-eyed species known for their obsessive analysis, blinked in unison, projecting impatience. The Waziks, amphibious beings with translucent skin stretched over complex internal sacs, flexed nervously in their specially engineered chairs. Even Hara, the low-gravity giants whose elongated limbs allowed them to tower above most species, leaned forward, resting enormous three-jointed fingers on the council table. Director Solis, said Zophyr, the red-skinned Zyphron with 6 independently rotating eyes, your proposal is radical. Are you certain it is even feasible? Humanity is unlike any species we have integrated. Fragmented, unpredictable, often self-contradictory. You ask that all 500 governments cooperate. Even now, many refuse to recognize one another's sovereignty. Some do not even acknowledge the authority of their own delegates. Solis folded his arms, remaining calm. I am aware, he replied. But feasibility alone has never dictated council policy. We must consider incentives and leverage. Humans respond to challenge and public accountability. If we make this a spectacle, if their integration depends entirely on their ability to cooperate, we can force results where conventional diplomacy fails. Hara's deep voice rumbled like distant tectonic plates. You propose coercion under the guise of protocol. If humans fail or if they react violently, the council risks a diplomatic disaster. Then we document the process, Solis said, his voice steady. Every decision, every instruction, every demand, recorded for the galaxy to see. Should humans fail, the fault lies with their species, not the council. He allowed the words to sink in. The chamber fell silent, a rare stillness in the normally cacophonous hall. Wazik's throat sacs inflated and deflated as he considered the proposal. Even if they cooperate, he croaked, the logistics, where would you host 500 human delegations plus their staff plus security? Our largest halls barely accommodate 200 species comfortably. Solis tapped a claw against the floor. We will rent the Gorath Hall. Originally designed for their ceremonial gatherings, it is massive. With modifications it can host all humans. The arrangement will be human-sized tables, human-sized seating. Every government represented. Every faction accountable. And the hall will remain sealed until the inventory is completed. Zophir's multiple eyes widened. Sealed? You will hold an entire species hostage in front of the galaxy? Not hostage, Solis replied. Responsible for their actions. Every human will know that their cooperation, or lack thereof, determines their membership and reputation. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some delegates nodded, others shook their heads in disbelief. Solis continued, projecting authority with every measured gesture. This is not merely an administrative exercise. Humanity is unique in its capacity for creativity and destruction. Their weapons are as varied as their civilizations. To integrate them safely, to allow them provisional membership, we must have full transparency. That transparency cannot be voluntary, it must be compelled, collectively and publicly. Hara's massive hand rapped against the table. And the risk? Suppose they refuse. Suppose violence erupts inside the hall. Chaos on this scale, the political fallout could last centuries. Solis considered this, then leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing. Which is why every species watching will see that we have offered humanity every opportunity. The responsibility lies entirely with them. If they fail, the consequences will be recorded, analyzed, and understood as the outcome of human fragmentation. Our procedures remain transparent. Our ethics intact. Wazak let out a slow bubble of exhalation. And you are confident humans will attempt cooperation? Solis's gaze sharpened. Humans are competitive. They may bicker, they may argue, but if the collective challenge is framed correctly, they will find a way. They will act out of self-interest, pride, and fear of public embarrassment. Trust me, they will try. The council deliberated for hours, examining procedural reports, simulated outcomes, and hypothetical risks. Delegates debated the cultural implications, the psychological impact, and the potential technological threats. Finally, the vote came. By a narrow margin, the proposal was approved. Solis exhaled, a small plume of condensation rising from his scaled nostrils. It was time. Over the next month, preparations dominated Tessara Prime. Teams of translators worked tirelessly to ensure no miscommunication between human factions. Data links were established so that ambassadors could communicate with their home governments. Food, water, medical facilities, and sanitation were arranged for thousands of attendees. Security systems were tested repeatedly, and emergency protocols rehearsed. When the day arrived, Solis stood at the doors of the modified Gorath Hall. His tail tapped lightly against the floor. Outside, the corridors thrummed with anticipation. Hundreds of human delegates, along with their entourages, awaited entry. They were as diverse as any species he had ever encountered. Men and women of every complexion, humans adorned in military regalia, flowing robes, and corporate suits. One delegation even included a genetically engineered feline-human hybrid ambassador, reflecting the astonishingly wide variation humanity had developed in the far colonies. Inside the hall, the modified semicircle tables stretched across the room, designed to place every human government in direct sight of each other. The chamber hummed with conversation, laughter, and arguments in dozens of languages, creating a wall of sound that would have been deafening to any species unaccustomed to human vocal frequencies. Solis stepped forward, activating the vocal amplification system embedded in the floor. The noise fell away, replaced by a tense hush. Ambassadors of humanity, he began, voice booming across the hall. You have been summoned to address a critical requirement for your provisional membership in the Galactic Council. Every member species must provide a comprehensive inventory of their weapons systems and technologies. This is essential for the calibration of security systems, training of peacekeeping forces, development of rules of engagement, and the maintenance of galactic peace. He paused, allowing the weight of the statement to settle over the assembly. Humanity presents a unique challenge. Fragmented across hundreds of sovereign entities, you maintain military capabilities and proprietary technologies beyond the oversight of any single authority. This fragmentation has made conventional documentation impossible. Therefore, this committee mandates the following. You, collectively, will produce a complete and comprehensive inventory of all weapons possessed by humanity. This includes personal, military, corporate, criminal, and experimental technologies. All data must be detailed, verified, and presented in full. A ripple of shock spread across the humans. Voices rose, arguing, gesturing, some shouting. Chairs scraped and tables shifted. Solis let the uproar build, knowing it was part of the process. You have 7 standard galactic days, he continued, voice amplified beyond any human capacity to ignore. The hall will remain sealed. Food and water are provided. Communication with your governments is permitted. Failure to deliver this inventory will result in exclusion from the council, and your species will remain isolated indefinitely. For 3 long seconds, silence returned. Then chaos erupted once more. Shouts, arguments, and laughter blended into a single overwhelming wave. Solis allowed it. Each human action, each reaction reinforced his theory. They would fight, they would argue, they would resist, but ultimately they would cooperate. His tail flicked once more as he turned toward the entrance. Behind him, the chamber remained alive with confusion, debate, and the raw energy of humanity. For the first time in centuries of service, Solis felt both apprehension and anticipation. The next week would determine not only the future of humanity but the course of galactic history itself. And somewhere deep in the chaos, humanity was already beginning to organize. The Great Hall of Gorath resonated with a chaos that no species other than humanity could ever have generated. Voices overlapped, debates spiraled, and alliances shifted faster than the eye could follow. Director Rael Solis, observing from the central dais, had anticipated confusion, but this was beyond even his considerable imagination. Every human ambassador seemed determined to assert their own authority, yet simultaneously aware that the collective success of the inventory depended on cooperation. The room was a living organism, constantly negotiating, arguing, and recalibrating itself. Some delegations huddled in corners with data pads, furiously communicating with home governments. Others scrawled notes on paper or made rapid calculations on holographic displays, projecting their ideas to anyone who would listen. And somewhere in the middle, a small group of humans had established a coordination council, comprised of volunteers from diverse political factions, with the audacious goal of managing the effort collectively. Solis watched as two human diplomats began an animated discussion about conflicting definitions of explosive ordnance. One, a stocky man in a gray suit from the Mars colony, insisted that incendiary devices should be classified under chemical weapons. The other, a wiry woman in flowing robes from a corporate state on Europa, argued that they belonged under physics-based ordnance, citing detailed operational manuals. Their voices rose until the air vibrated, but neither backed down. And yet, within 2 hours they had begun to compromise. Categories were merged, subcategories created, and initial drafts of classification tables circulated digitally. Humanity's competitiveness, the very trait that had worried so many council delegates, was being transformed into productivity. They would argue yes, but in that argument lay progress. Nearby, a delegation from Venus debated whether nanotechnology-based weapons should be considered theoretical until fully tested or operational. Across the room, children of Earth, human prodigies sent by parental governments, were experimenting with holographic projections, modeling trajectories of historical catapults, railguns, and chemical devices. Every corner of the hall became a microcosm of humanity's intellectual diversity. Engineers and historians, chemists and strategists, politicians and soldiers, all working simultaneously toward the impossible goal. Solis scribbled notes on his data pad. So far, behavior aligns with prediction. Competitive nature does not preclude collaboration. Risk of failure remains high, but probability of partial success is increasing. Hours passed and the cacophony showed signs of coherence. Teams began exchanging documents, cross-referencing historical data with modern technology. A representative from Titan shared proprietary schematics for ionized plasma rifles, while a scientist from the Moon colony contributed historical research on trebuchets and siege engines, complete with force calculations and construction diagrams. Even rogue groups, previously unrecognized by most governments, submitted preliminary data, wary of being excluded from the process entirely. By midday, Solis could see the beginnings of a rudimentary structure emerging. The human factions had set up central repositories, physical and digital, organized by category and subcategory. Melee weapons, projectile systems, chemical and biological devices, experimental and theoretical technology, and ancient weaponry preserved for cultural purposes. Subcommittees were assigned to each category, often composed of competitors or adversaries, forced into reluctant collaboration. Despite the progress, friction was everywhere. One altercation broke out between representatives of two rival factions on Mercury, arguing over whether a set of exotic physics weapons developed independently should be classified as operational or theoretical. Solis considered intervening, but Hara's massive hand gestured him back. Humans thrived in these moments of conflict. Conflict was not a failure, it was the engine of progress. By the second day, the hall had transformed from chaotic theater into a buzzing hive of productive tension. Delegates had established voting mechanisms for contentious classifications, and even the most stubborn factions were submitting preliminary entries into the inventory database. Solis observed with cautious optimism. Humanity's competitiveness, once a potential liability, was being harnessed into collaboration through public accountability, collective visibility, and peer pressure. Around the third day, practical challenges began to surface. The sheer volume of weapons, ranging from simple bows and swords preserved for cultural ceremonies to exotic matter cannons capable of planetary destruction, required meticulous documentation. Teams of historians, engineers, chemists, and tacticians worked around the clock, often sleeping at improvised stations or in quiet corners of the hall. Delegates rotated shifts, maintaining constant productivity. Even minor errors in classification sparked debates that could last hours, as accuracy was paramount. Any mistake could compromise the Council's future calibration of security systems. Solis noted that humans had begun to invent new tools on the spot. Portable holographic displays were constructed to simulate weapon functions, allowing cross-faction understanding. Algorithms were developed to reconcile conflicting historical records and operational specifications. Even theoretical weapons, like temporal displacement devices and quantum destabilizers, were recorded with carefully considered caveats, ensuring clarity and accountability. On the fourth day, an unexpected breakthrough occurred. Delegates from Earth's historical societies discovered a shared archive of pre-spaceflight weapon designs: trebuchets, slings, early firearms, and chemical agents. This archive provided the historical continuity necessary to link past innovations with modern technological trajectories. Simultaneously, corporate factions contributed detailed specifications for orbital kinetic impactors, antimatter containment systems, and experimental nanotech devices. The hall echoed with the sounds of typing, debates, and laughter. Solis realized that humans were not merely meeting the Council's demands, they were surpassing them. Each faction, motivated by the fear of losing face in front of the entire galaxy, ensured that every entry was complete, accurate, and cross-referenced. Even previously isolated factions, once assumed to be non-cooperative, had begun submitting data voluntarily. By the fifth day, Solis could see the true scale of the human accomplishment. Physical storage containers were stacked meticulously along the perimeter of the hall, each labeled and organized. Digital files were being uploaded to secure Council servers, fully indexed and searchable in real time. Delegates rotated to review, edit, and expand documentation continuously. Even the most exotic experimental devices, from antimatter cannons to relativistic mass drivers, were now represented with detailed schematics, operational parameters, and safety protocols. Exhaustion began to show. Dark circles under eyes, disheveled clothing, and frayed tempers became commonplace. Yet productivity never faltered. Arguments persisted, but now they were accompanied by compromise and mutual respect. By leveraging their innate competitiveness, human delegates had created an unprecedented collaborative framework, producing what might become the largest weapons inventory in galactic history. On the sixth day, a critical moment arrived. Delegates realized that the volume of documentation, already massive, would require organization across multiple formats: physical volumes, digital archives, holographic simulations, and visual schematics. A proposal was made to divide the inventory into thematic volumes: primitive and historical weapons, standard military equipment, corporate proprietary systems, experimental and exotic weapons, and theoretical constructs. Debate ensued over which weapons should fall under which volume, with compromises ultimately determined by majority vote. Solis observed this with a mix of admiration and disbelief. No species in Council history had ever achieved such collective organization under pressure. Yet humans thrived in the chaos. They argued, compromised, documented, and created order from disorder, not because it was easy but because they were compelled by pride, peer pressure, and the clear visibility of every action. By the seventh day, the final preparations were underway. Physical storage containers were labeled Volume 1 through Volume 47, encompassing everything from ancient bows to theoretical stellar compression devices. Digital repositories were synchronized and cross-referenced, providing accessibility for any Council member species. Delegates conducted final reviews, ensuring completeness and accuracy. The hall, once a maelstrom of sound, now buzzed with controlled energy, the calm before the culmination of a monumental effort. Solis stood once more at the center of the hall. "Ambassadors," he announced, his amplified voice carrying across the semicircle, "you have one standard galactic day remaining to finalize your inventory. This is your collective opportunity to demonstrate both competence and unity. The Council observes, history records, and your species' future depends on the completeness of your documentation." The humans responded with a chorus of determined nods, the first real sign that they had internalized the gravity of the task. Every faction, every government, every rogue inventor was now committed to the common goal. Exhaustion, stress, and debate remained, but they had achieved something remarkable. Humanity, in all its chaos and diversity, had begun to operate as one organism. As Solis left the hall that evening, he allowed himself a rare smile. They might actually do it, he thought. Against all odds, they might succeed. And somewhere deep within the corridors of Gorath Hall, human delegates continued to argue, calculate, and compromise, driven by pride, necessity, and the uniquely human compulsion to rise to impossible challenges. Tomorrow the inventory would be presented. The galaxy would bear witness to either humanity's triumph or failure, and Solis knew one truth above all. Whatever the outcome, the story of human ingenuity, chaos, and resilience would echo through the stars for generations. The final day of preparation dawned with a tense quiet in the great hall of Gorath. Outside, the stars of dozens of systems twinkled like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the monumental task being undertaken within. Inside, hundreds of human delegates moved with purposeful exhaustion, cross-referencing, filing, and double-checking entries. The hall, which had once been a cacophony of competing voices, now resembled a vast human organism in synchronized operation. Director Rael Solis returned to the center dais, his tail, a vestigial reminder of his predatory ancestry, tapping in irregular rhythm against the floor. He observed the delegates from every corner of the galaxy, noting that no alien species could possibly understand the scale of human organization. Every faction, from corporate states on icy moons to desert kingdoms of Mars, had contributed fully. Even the most chaotic rogue collectives had complied, driven by peer pressure, pride, and the threat of isolation from the Galactic Council. He inhaled, letting the enormity of the situation settle in. For a single species to produce a complete inventory of all weapons they possessed, from primitive hand tools to theoretical stellar destruction devices, was unprecedented. And yet, as he watched the humans coordinate effortlessly, he felt a flicker of unease. The completeness of the inventory once achieved could radically alter the balance of power across the galaxy. The first group to approach the dais carried stacks of thick leather-bound volumes. Volume 1 contained ancient and historical weapons, meticulously catalogued. Bows, arrows, slings, early firearms. Every entry included schematics, measurements, effective ranges, and cultural context. Illustrations were precise, with annotations regarding operational principles, usage, and variations across regions. Solis flipped through a random page. A longbow from 70,000 BCE, reconstructed from fragments in a remote Martian colony, detailed with tensile strength, arrow trajectory, and material composition. Each annotation demonstrated both human ingenuity and obsessive attention to detail. Even the most primitive tools were documented with the rigor of a modern weapons engineer. Volume 2 arrived, heavier and filled with early projectile weapons, siege engines, and early gunpowder devices. Catapults, trebuchets, crossbows, all classified by mechanical principles, historical significance, and effective destructive capability. Diagrams included cross-sectional views, force calculations, and tactical applications. Even theoretical reconstructions of historical battles were documented, showing the efficiency of various weapon systems. Solis's eyes widened. The Council's most advanced scholars could not have produced anything comparable. Volumes 3 through 10 arrived next, documenting firearms, explosives, chemical and biological weapons, and industrial-scale devices. Each entry was accompanied by photographs, diagrams, and cross-references. Human ingenuity shone not only in modern devices but also in the meticulous preservation of knowledge, ensuring historical continuity. Then came volumes 11 through 25, standard military hardware. Rifles, tanks, orbital strike platforms, autonomous drone systems, and anti-ship missiles, all documented with operational ranges, ammunition types, and failure contingencies. Each entry included a section titled Historical Use, detailing battlefield deployments, strategic effectiveness, and technological evolution. Delegates murmured among themselves. Some whispered anxiously, realizing the implications. Humans had not merely complied, they had created a reference library that could redefine galactic understanding of warfare. Solis noticed the rising tension in the hall. Alien species had assumed humans were fragmented, incapable of coordinated action, and technologically limited. They were wrong. Humanity had united in an unprecedented display of efficiency. Volumes 26 through 35 contained advanced technologies, orbital kinetic impactors, railguns, laser systems, and experimental plasma weapons. Each entry described launch parameters, kinetic energy calculations, energy consumption, operational protocols, and maintenance requirements. Holographic models projected trajectories, velocities, and simulated battlefield deployment. Solis realized that even with centuries of Council technology, many species could not comprehend half of what humans had documented. Volumes 36 through 40 were dedicated to clandestine and proprietary technologies. Corporate states contributed designs for antimatter containment units, experimental propulsion-based weapons, and defensive systems. Rogue collectives added blueprints for modified exoskeletons, nanotech infiltrators, and unmanned weaponized drones. Every entry was meticulously cross-referenced, ensuring that future Council members could track origins, authorship, and operational history. Volumes 41 through 46 contain the exotic and theoretical. Antimatter cannons, subatomic particle disruptors, nanotechnology capable of molecular disassembly, temporal displacement devices, and quantum vacuum collapse initiators. Most had never been built, but human scientists included detailed schematics, safety protocols, theoretical calculations, and risk assessments. Notes warned, "Do not attempt unless absolutely necessary," or "Prototype exists only under controlled conditions." Solis's mind struggled to comprehend the scale. He held volume 41, and the complexity of the theoretical designs made his eyes ache. These were not simply blueprints, they were the distilled ingenuity, creativity, and ambition of humanity itself. The potential power contained in these pages could alter entire star systems if misused. Finally, volume 47 arrived, the most feared and mysterious of all. It contained everything classified as exotic physics or forbidden technologies. Stellar compression devices, relativistic mass drivers, and experimental antimatter cannons were detailed with rigorous mathematical models, engineering specifications, and failsafes. These were technologies that had previously existed only in theory or rumor, now meticulously documented for the Council. Solis held the book with trembling hands. Every species in the room could now access this knowledge, provided they could comprehend it. A wave of laughter and disbelief rolled through the human delegation. Exhausted but triumphant, they watched as Solis flipped through the pages. This is, he stammered, his voice almost drowned by the volume of information. Each entry contained operational diagrams, simulations, historical applications, and projected consequences. Even the most mundane weapons were documented with care, from handguns to improvised explosives. Director Solis, a human woman said from the front row, voice calm despite exhaustion, "We did what you asked. Every weapon, every design, every variant, here it is. You wanted completeness, we've given you that." Solis turned to the assembled aliens. Eyes wide, mouths slightly agape, they struggled to process what had just been accomplished. Not only had humans unified across hundreds of factions, they had created a comprehensive reference library surpassing anything in Council history. He swallowed, trying to maintain composure. This is remarkable," he admitted, voice amplified through the hall. "You have exceeded all expectations, and yet, I must warn you, there are consequences." Whispers rippled through the humans. Consequences. Every species now has access to this documentation, Solis continued, gesturing toward the massive volumes and the digital archives being uploaded to Council servers. Every rogue faction, every corporate entity, every independent researcher in the galaxy will now have access to your designs. The knowledge you've compiled is unparalleled, and the ramifications are immense. The humans exchanged glances. Pride mingled with exhaustion, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. They had completed the impossible, yet they had changed the galaxy in the process. Solis walked slowly among the human delegates, pausing to examine digital files on portable holographic displays. Every calculation, every diagram, every operational manual had been verified, cross-referenced, and catalogued. His pulse raced. The sheer scale was almost incomprehensible, and the potential for misuse, catastrophic. From the balcony above, Hara leaned forward, her massive arms folded. "Do you understand what this means, Solis?" she asked. Her voice rumbled through the hall, steady but commanding. "No other species has ever produced anything even close to this. The galaxy will never be the same." Solis nodded slowly. "I understand," he replied, voice measured. "Humanity has united, accomplished the impossible, and shared their knowledge openly. But the power contained here could destabilize entire systems if misused." The human delegation, despite fatigue, began to celebrate quietly. Small smiles, nods, and restrained laughter spread through the room. Exhaustion had not dulled their sense of accomplishment. They had overcome fragmentation, bureaucracy, and interfactional rivalry to achieve something unprecedented in galactic history. Solis returned to the dais, holding volume 47 with reverence. He glanced at the aliens in attendance, their expressions a mix of awe, fear, and admiration. Humanity had done what no other species could. They had unified under impossible constraints, solved a bureaucratic and logistical nightmare, and in the process, demonstrated the depth of their ingenuity, resilience, and competitive spirit. The next phase would be the Council review, where every member species would assess the documentation, validate classifications, and determine operational implications. But for now, humanity had completed the impossible. A full, comprehensive inventory of their weapons from ancient history to cutting-edge theoretical constructs. Solis exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. The task was done, the inventory compiled, and the future uncertain. But humanity had proven itself. And that, he realized, was the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. The council chamber had never felt so small. Not in the literal sense. The Gorath Hall could hold hundreds of species, each 3 to 10 times taller than a human, but in impact. The sheer scale of humanity's documentation had turned the vast space into a crucible of tension. Director Rael Solis stood once more at the dais, flanked by the council's integration officers, facing representatives from every member species. The humans were present too, clustered in neat rows, exhausted yet radiating quiet defiance. Solis cleared his throat, activating the hall's amplification system. Members of the Galactic Council and esteemed human delegates, the inventory of human weapons has been completed, compiled into 47 volumes of documentation, and uploaded to the Council's secure servers. What you hold, or will soon access digitally, is unprecedented in its scope, scale, and completeness. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Alien delegates exchanged wide-eyed glances. Few could fathom the extent of what had been accomplished. Each species had assumed humanity to be chaotic, fragmented, and incapable of coherent action. They were wrong. Humanity had outperformed every expectation, even under extreme constraints. Solis raised a hand. We are now entering the review phase. Every species has access to the documentation. Every expert may study, analyze, and validate the entries according to their own understanding. However, his gaze swept across the chamber, landing on skeptical eyes from the Draven and the Flesian delegations. There are consequences to unprecedented knowledge. From the balcony above, Hara's deep voice resonated. We cannot underestimate the implications. Hundreds of civilizations will now gain insight into technologies previously inaccessible. Even experimental systems, antimatter containment, stellar compression devices, nanotech assemblers, are now fully detailed. A ripple of concern spread among the council members. Solis's tail flicked nervously, betraying his own unease. This is not a reprimand, he clarified. The humans have complied fully. They have demonstrated unity and ingenuity under impossible circumstances. The Council's own history, however, teaches us that knowledge alone changes power dynamics, sometimes unpredictably. A human delegate in a simple, worn suit raised a hand. Solis nodded toward him. Director Solis, the man said, voice firm despite fatigue, we did exactly what was requested. Every weapon, every schematic, every theoretical concept is documented and cross-referenced. We followed your instructions to the letter. What you perceive as danger is simply accountability in action. Knowledge is not destruction, it is empowerment. Solis gave a faint nod. He knew the truth in the statement, but he also knew the galaxy would interpret it differently. Alien civilizations rarely acted with the same nuance humans did. Where humans saw empowerment, others saw threats. The first council specialists began examining the volumes. Draven engineers scrutinized orbital kinetic impactor schematics. Flesian biologists studied human biochemical weapon manuals. The Kyler, whose civilization lacked comprehensive energy manipulation systems, struggled to comprehend plasma weapon designs but attempted to model them digitally. Across the chamber, a dozen languages and a dozen forms of communication converged in an unprecedented effort to decode, analyze, and validate the human documentation. Solis felt a cold weight in his chest. Even with humanity's meticulous care, not all interpretations would be accurate. Misunderstandings could, and likely would, lead to weapon proliferation, misapplication, and conflict. He had created a structure that guaranteed both transparency and chaos. Hours turned into days. Delegates analyzed, debated, and cross-referenced. Council servers processed exabytes of data, integrating human documentation into the galactic registry. Solis spent most of his time coordinating queries, mediating disputes, and ensuring security protocols were followed. The aliens' capacity to digest the material was slower than humans' meticulous logic, but the humans themselves moved like machines, exhausted, precise, and methodical. By the third day, the first anomalies appeared. A group of minor mercantile states misinterpreted a kinetic impactor's energy output. They assumed it required minimal energy to launch, creating simulation programs that projected catastrophic planetary damage if deployed incorrectly. Panic spread in a small sector, later corrected, but the Council realized the first lesson. Even well-documented human designs could be misunderstood by civilizations lacking similar engineering paradigms. On the fifth day, Solis convened a press-like session within the chamber. Ambassadors, he began, voice firm, we are observing both compliance and misunderstanding. While the humans have completed their task flawlessly, Other species are struggling to interpret the complexity inherent in human technology. This is the first tangible example of the unintended consequences of complete transparency. A Flesian delegate, ears twitching nervously, raised a question. "Director Solis, are you suggesting humans are dangerous?" Solis shook his head. "Not inherently. Humans are uniquely adaptable, creative, and resilient. They excel under pressure, unify in the face of adversity, and think in ways no other species does. But the sheer volume and sophistication of their documentation, accessible to every species in the Council, poses risks that must be mitigated." He gestured toward the human delegates. "They are your partners, your guides, and your equals in this review. They will advise, clarify, and explain the systems, preventing misinterpretation. This is both a privilege and a necessity. The galaxy will only remain stable if human knowledge is contextualized by human oversight." Throughout the chamber, humans began coordinating with alien delegates. They demonstrated proper operation of complex systems and virtual simulations, annotated critical safety protocols, and explained design rationale. Even mundane systems, chemical weapons, projectile devices, explosives, were presented with historical context and operational guidance. Solis observed a subtle transformation in the council chamber. Initially chaotic, the review process evolved into a structured, almost human-like bureaucracy. Humans thrived in the structure, aliens adjusted reluctantly, and the council itself began adapting to the unprecedented situation. Yet amidst the apparent order, Solis felt unease. Humanity had demonstrated one clear truth: they could achieve what others could not. Coordination across hundreds of factions, meticulous documentation of both practical and theoretical weaponry, and the willingness to confront transparency for collective benefit. These were uniquely human traits. And those traits could be leveraged for good or ill. Late into the sixth day, Solis reviewed the final volume. Volume 47 remained the most sensitive: exotic physics, theoretical devices, stellar-scale weapons. He scanned antimatter containment schematics, stellar compression designs, and relativistic kinetic systems. Each entry included exhaustive safety protocols, redundancies, and failsafes. Humans had clearly anticipated misuse. Yet the potential for abuse remained immense. A young human delegate, barely out of what humans called adolescence, approached Solis. "Director, we've anticipated the misinterpretation risks. For every complex system, we've included cross-references to explanatory volumes, simulations, and even guidance for non-human engineers. You'll notice that every step, every variable, every constraint is documented. Transparency with caution." Solis inclined his head, impressed despite his concerns. Humans had thought of everything. Even accounting for misunderstanding, he realized they had mitigated risk better than any council protocol could have predicted. By the seventh day, the council convened for the final assessment. Representatives from hundreds of species reported compliance, understanding, and operational clarity. Humans, though visibly exhausted, moved with coordinated precision, providing guidance wherever gaps remained. Solis addressed the chamber one last time. "Humans have completed an unprecedented task. They have produced the first complete inventory of a species' weapons systems, from primitive to theoretical. They have demonstrated unity, ingenuity, and an unprecedented ability to adapt." The Council acknowledges both the accomplishment and the risks inherent in this transparency. Murmurs of admiration, concern, and disbelief spread throughout the chamber. Even the most skeptical species had to concede that humanity's achievement was unparalleled. Hara, massive and imposing, leaned forward. "Director Solis, this changes everything. Humanity is no longer just a new member species. They are a benchmark. Other civilizations will be measured against their ingenuity, resilience, and ability to cooperate under extreme constraints." Solis exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment. He had intended only to enforce protocol, to compel compliance with a seemingly impossible bureaucratic task. Instead, he had witnessed the emergence of a force unlike any the galaxy had seen. Humanity had proven that even under scrutiny, under the watchful eyes of countless species, they could unify, execute, and innovate on a scale previously unimaginable. Yet beneath the admiration a shadow loomed. The consequences of sharing such comprehensive knowledge would ripple across the galaxy. Systems would be destabilized, alliances challenged, and power balances shifted. Humanity's success had saved their council membership, but it had also armed the galaxy with blueprints for both defense and destruction. Solis glanced at the human delegates. Exhausted but proud. Defiant yet compliant. In them he saw both hope and chaos intertwined. And in that moment he understood. The inventory was not just a record of weapons. It was a testament to the nature of humanity itself, a species that thrived under pressure, challenged impossibilities, and reshaped the galaxy in the process. The council chamber erupted in applause, cautious, respectful, and tinged with awe. Humans nodded, acknowledged, and returned to their work. Solis, standing at the dais, allowed himself a moment of rare reflection. Humanity had done the impossible. They had survived scrutiny, bureaucracy, and logistical chaos. They had unified, innovated, and shared their knowledge, demonstrating both brilliance and responsibility. Yet, as he observed the galaxy's reaction, Solis realized something sobering. The real challenge had only just begun. Humanity's ingenuity had been revealed, but the galaxy had yet to decide how to handle it. The lost century, Solis thought grimly, was only a prelude. The true reckoning, the age in which human innovation would reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization, was about to begin. The council chambers fell silent after the unprecedented review. Humanity had achieved what no other species had even attempted: a fully comprehensive weapons inventory, meticulously documented across 47 volumes. Every galaxy-spanning faction had witnessed their collective unity, ingenuity, and capacity for cooperation. Yet as the humans left the hall, exhausted and triumphant, the council knew the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Weeks turned into months. The 47 volumes, along with the digital repositories, were now accessible to all member species. Initially, the council had anticipated careful study, measured integration, and cautious policy adjustments. What happened instead was an acceleration of technological evolution that no one could have predicted. In the Outer Rim, minor mercantile states reverse-engineered basic projectile and energy weaponry. Within a year, formerly unarmed colonies fielded tactical drone fleets and defensive orbital batteries. Kinetic impactor schematics were analyzed and adapted. Rogue engineering teams discovered they could build orbital strike platforms that the Council had assumed were decades away from operational feasibility. Entire planetary defense grids were redesigned using human principles, drastically altering local power balances. Meanwhile, criminal organizations seized the opportunity to apply human designs. Antimatter and high-yield chemical weapon schematics were reproduced with terrifying efficiency. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping forces were caught off guard. Their rules of engagement, previously calibrated to manage incremental weapon proliferation, were suddenly obsolete. Within 5 years, Council peacekeeping missions had transformed from conflict mediation into full-scale warfare against entities armed with unprecedented human-derived technology. Director Solis observed the unfolding chaos with a mixture of awe and horror. From the safety of the Council headquarters, he watched holographic displays detailing the first wave of conflicts. Orbital kinetic strikes leveling pirate outposts, engineered plagues spreading through unprepared settlements, and nanotech sabotage dismantling industrial centers. Each incident traced back, directly or indirectly, to information released in the 47 volumes. Yet for all the chaos, Solis also noted an unexpected pattern. Species with guidance from humans themselves, those that collaborated with human ambassadors or engineers, managed the integration safely. Civilizations that followed human oversight avoided catastrophic mistakes, while those acting independently often stumbled into disaster. The humans, it seemed, had anticipated the dangers inherent in sharing knowledge and had mitigated the worst outcomes wherever possible. By the end of the first decade, a new galactic paradigm began to emerge. The lost century, as historians would later call it, was marked by asymmetric warfare, rapid technological proliferation, and unprecedented adaptation. Entire regions of space became laboratories for human-inspired innovation. Pirates became tactical geniuses, minor colonies became power players, and even established council species found themselves scrambling to keep up. Humanity, in turn, continued to innovate, ensuring that their designs remained one step ahead of any misuse. Solis convened a private council meeting to assess the long-term implications. Hara, towering over all, spoke first. "We underestimated humanity's capacity for foresight. Even in exhaustion, they anticipated how others might misuse their designs. Their contingency planning is extraordinary." Zafir's multi-eyed gaze scanned the council floor. Extraordinary indeed, but destabilizing. Entire systems now operate outside any previous understanding of security. Pirate fleets with antimatter cannons, anarchist collectives armed with relativistic projectiles. This is unprecedented. How can we maintain order? Solis exhaled, tail flicking in agitation. We can't maintain order in the old way. The galaxy has changed. Humans have demonstrated that chaos can be constructive if channeled correctly, and destructive if left unchecked. Our methods must evolve, or be replaced entirely. Hara nodded slowly. We must integrate human oversight into security councils. Their insight is no longer optional, it is essential. They've become the benchmarks against which every species' military and technological capabilities will be measured. The human ambassadorial team, now exhausted but alert, had already begun collaborating with council engineers to create oversight protocols. They proposed voluntary disclosure frameworks, mutual security agreements, and cross-species advisory councils designed to prevent catastrophic misuse while encouraging innovation. Solis watched as humans codified a system that balanced transparency, responsibility, and operational control, remarkably similar to the principles the council itself had relied upon for millennia, but infinitely more dynamic. In parallel, humanity experienced a renaissance of strategic influence. Their ability to cooperate across fragmented governments, to unify disparate factions for a common goal, and to innovate under extreme pressure made them indispensable. Within 20 years, humans held leadership roles in multiple council committees, including security, scientific research, and diplomatic integration. Their influence reshaped policies across the galaxy. Yet humanity did not relinquish caution. The 47 volumes remained accessible, but human engineers embedded safeguards, explanatory footnotes, operational warnings, and built-in limitations for experimental technologies. The Council had access to knowledge, but humans retained subtle control over interpretation. It was a masterclass in responsibility, empowerment without recklessness. Solis walked the halls of the Council headquarters, reflecting on the journey. The lost century had been turbulent, chaotic, and at times catastrophic. Entire regions of space had experienced upheaval as new technologies proliferated. But the result was a galaxy that was, paradoxically, stronger and more adaptable. Humanity had forced the Council, and all species within it, to evolve. He paused before a holographic display showing human-led security coordination across multiple sectors. Drones monitored orbital traffic, engineers calibrated new defenses, and ambassadors mediated disputes between factions armed with human-derived weaponry. Solis allowed himself a rare smile. Humanity had succeeded beyond even his highest expectations. And yet, he remembered the final moments of the inventory review, the exhaustion, the laughter, the pride. The humans had shared every design, every experiment, every theoretical weapon they had ever conceived. Every criminal, pirate, and ambitious civilization now possessed unprecedented knowledge. The galaxy had been armed as never before. Solis shivered at the thought of what could have gone wrong, but humans had mitigated disaster with extraordinary foresight. By the end of the lost century, the Council had restructured itself entirely. The standard weapons documentation requirement, a bureaucratic relic that had existed for millennia, was abolished. In its place were voluntary disclosure systems, guided oversight, and active collaboration with human experts. Humanity's unique combination of ingenuity, resilience, and foresight had permanently reshaped the galaxy's approach to security and technology. The epilogue of history books would note the following. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to unify across hundreds of fragmented governments to achieve a single goal. Sharing knowledge transparently, even of potentially catastrophic technologies, could be accomplished responsibly with proper oversight. Chaos, when structured and guided, could produce innovation that far surpassed traditional bureaucratic control. The lost century had been both a cautionary tale and a testament to human ingenuity, proving that a species could simultaneously threaten and safeguard the galaxy. Director Solis, now older and reflective, stood once more in the council chamber. The humans had returned to their worlds, though maintaining continuous liaison with the council. He looked at the remaining volumes, digital files streaming in real time, and allowed himself one final observation. Humanity had not just survived the integration challenge, they had reshaped the very fabric of galactic civilization, leaving a legacy of both awe and caution. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, Solis thought quietly, it was better that way.